My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. The text from my daughter, Chloe, made no sense. It was just 3 words. The air is. That was it. Nothing else. No follow-up. No answer when I called. A cold fear, sharper than any winter wind, gripped my heart. I didn't stop for a coat. I didn't tell my neighbor where I was going. I just grabbed my car keys and ran out of my little house in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, my old heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. The drive to Chloe's house was a blur of panic and worst-case scenarios. Was she sick? Had she fallen? Why would she text something so strange? I screeched my old sedan to a halt in her driveway, not even parking properly. The front door was unlocked, which was odd. The house was silent. Too silent. "Chloe!" I called out, my voice trembling. "Baby, it's Mom. Where are you?" There was no answer. I rushed through the living room, the kitchen, her bedroom. All empty. Then I heard it. A faint, weak sound. A thump. It was coming from the basement door. The door was locked with a heavy bolt, one I'd never seen before. My blood ran cold. I fumbled with the bolt, my arthritic fingers screaming in protest, and finally shoved it open. The darkness down there was thick and smelled wrong. Like chemicals and dust. "Chloe!" I screamed, flipping the light switch. Nothing happened. The bulb was dead. I stumbled down the wooden steps, my eyes struggling to adjust. And then I saw her. My beautiful Chloe. She was on the concrete floor, her face pale, and her lips tinged with blue. Her hands were scrabbling weakly at the floor, her chest heaving as she fought for a single, clean breath. She was locked in her own basement, fighting for air. Before I continue with this story, I have to ask you, the person listening to my voice right now, where in the world are you? Please leave a comment and tell me where you are watching from and what time it is for you. It helps me feel less alone, knowing who is sharing this difficult memory with me. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to how this terrible day started. My name is Beverly, though all my friends call me Bev. I'm 68 years old, and I've lived in Cedar Rapids my whole life. I love my garden, my crossword puzzles, and my weekly phone calls with Chloe more than anything in this world. That morning had started like any other. The sun was shining, my roses were blooming, and I was humming along to an old song on the radio while I watered my petunias. Life felt peaceful and good. My daughter, Chloe, is 35. She's a kind soul, always has been. Even as a little girl, she'd bring home stray cats and injured birds, her big green eyes full of empathy. She worked as a librarian and lived just 20 minutes away in a nice, quiet neighborhood. Her husband, Mark, had always seemed like a good man. A little quiet, maybe, but he made her happy, or so I thought. They'd been married for 10 years. That morning, after I finished my coffee, I sent Chloe my usual good morning text. "Hope you have a wonderful day, my sweet girl. Love you." She usually replied right away with a heart emoji or a funny picture of their dog, Buster. But that day an hour passed, then 2. No reply. A little knot of worry tightened in my stomach. It wasn't like her. I told myself she was probably just busy at work, that the library was having a big event. I tried to focus on my puzzle, but the words just swam in front of my eyes. Then, at 11:47 a.m., my phone buzzed. A wave of relief washed over me. It was Chloe. But when I opened the message, the relief vanished, replaced by a confusion so deep it felt like falling. "The air is." That was the entire message. The air is what? Is cold? Is fresh? Is thin? It was a sentence cut off, a thought left hanging in the most terrifying way. I immediately called her. It rang and then went to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Chloe. Leave a message." Her cheerful voice sounded like it was from another lifetime. I called again. And again. Nothing. That's when the real fear set in. It wasn't a prank. It wasn't a mistake. Something was very, very wrong. I called the library. The woman who answered said Chloe had called in sick that morning. Sick? She had sounded fine when we spoke last night. My mind raced. Was she home alone? Was Mark at work? I tried his number, but it went straight to voicemail. The silence from their end of town was deafening. That's when I made the decision to drive over there. I didn't think. I just acted. I rushed out the door, my slippers still on my feet, and drove to her house faster than I should have. Every red light felt like a personal insult. Every slow car in front of me felt like it was deliberately trying to stop me. My hands were glued to the steering wheel, my knuckles white. All I could see were those 3 words on my phone screen. The air is. I finally turned onto her street. Her car was in the driveway. Mark's was gone. The house looked quiet, the blinds on the front windows drawn. I pulled in behind her car, my tires crunching on the gravel. I didn't even turn the engine off properly in my hurry. I just ran to the front door, my old bones protesting with every step. The door was unlocked. That was the first wrong thing. Chloe was always so careful about locking up. I pushed it open and stepped into the hallway. "Chloe, honey, are you home?" The silence that answered me was thick and heavy, pressing down on my ears. I walked through the living room. A cup of tea was on the coffee table, cold and untouched. Buster, their golden retriever, wasn't barking. That was the second wrong thing. Buster always barked when someone came to the door. A cold dread began to crawl up my spine. Where was the dog? I checked the kitchen, the downstairs bathroom. Nothing. I ran upstairs, my breath coming in short gasps. Her bedroom was tidy, the bed made. The guest room was empty. The office was silent. My panic was rising, a tide of pure terror threatening to drown me. She wasn't here. But her car was outside. I was about to run back downstairs to call the police when I heard it. A soft, muffled whine. It was so faint I almost missed it. It was coming from the hall closet. I yanked the door open. There was Buster, curled up on a pile of coats, looking scared. Someone had locked him in there. My heart plummeted. Why would anyone lock a dog in a closet? Unless they didn't want him to bark. Unless they didn't want him to be found. That's when my eyes fell on the basement door. It was always just a plain door, usually left ajar. But now a shiny new metal bolt was slid across it, locked firmly in place. A lock on the outside. To keep something in. Or someone. That's when I knew. I didn't know how or why, but I knew my daughter was behind that door. I rushed to it, my fingers fumbling with the cold, hard metal of the bolt. It was stiff, rusted in place, or maybe just new and unforgiving. I pushed and pulled, my frail hands aching. "I'm coming, Chloe. Mommy's coming." I grunted, putting all my weight into it. Finally, with a loud, scraping screech, the bolt slid back. I threw the door open. A wave of stale, chemical-tinged air hit me, making me cough. The stairs descended into pure blackness. The light switch at the top of the stairs did nothing. "Chloe!" I screamed into the darkness. And then I heard it. A weak, gasping sound. A struggle for breath. I didn't hesitate. I plunged down into the dark, my hand on the rough wooden wall to guide me. The air grew thicker, harder to breathe with every step down. And then I saw her, a pale shape in the gloom, lying on the cold concrete. Her body was convulsing as she tried desperately to suck in air that wasn't there. I fell to my knees beside her, grabbing her shoulders. Her skin was cold and clammy. Her eyes were wide with terror, looking at me but not seeing me. "Chloe! Baby, I'm here. Breathe. Just breathe." I cried, but I knew the problem wasn't her. It was the air in this room. It was poison. I looked around wildly, trying to see in the near-total darkness. What was happening? Why was the air so bad? And then I saw it. In the far corner, barely visible, was a small, portable generator. A thin, deadly hose snaked from its exhaust and ended right near where Chloe's head lay. Someone had deliberately piped the exhaust fumes into this sealed basement. Someone had tried to kill my daughter. Just as that horrifying thought solidified in my mind, a floorboard creaked loudly above our heads. Heavy footsteps walked across the living room floor, right above the basement. Someone was in the house. The footsteps stopped at the top of the basement stairs. A shadow fell over us, blocking the little light that filtered down from the open door. I looked up, my heart freezing in my chest. I couldn't see the face, just a dark silhouette against the bright doorway. A deep, familiar voice spoke, and the sound of it turned my blood to ice. Well, Bev," the voice said. "I didn't expect you to be part of the package." The voice was like a bucket of ice water thrown right into my face. It was Mark, my son-in-law, the man who had stood at the altar with my daughter and promised to love and protect her. Now he was standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at us in this poisonous darkness, and his voice was cold and flat, devoid of all the warmth I thought I knew. My body froze, crouched over Chloe. Her breathing was still a horrible, ragged gasp. Every instinct in my old body screamed at me to protect her, to shield her from the man who had done this. I tightened my arms around her, trying to make myself a human wall between her and the monster upstairs. "Mark," I said, and my voice came out as a shaky whisper. "What have you done? What is this? She can't breathe." He took a step down, and the wooden step groaned under his weight. "I can see that," he said, his voice still so terribly calm. "It's a real shame you had to get involved, Bev. You should have just minded your own business." Minded my own business? A spark of anger cut through my fear. "This is my daughter. Help me get her out of here. Now!" He took another step down, and now I could see his face more clearly in the dim light from the doorway. His expression was blank, like a mask. There was no anger, no panic, no emotion at all. That was more terrifying than if he had been screaming. "It's too late for that," he said softly. "She was supposed to be found later, after the carbon monoxide had done its job. A tragic accident. A faulty water heater, maybe." He gestured vaguely toward the old, dormant heater in the corner, a cruel prop in his horrible play. "But you ruined the timeline. Carbon monoxide." The words echoed in my head. The silent, invisible killer. No smell, no color. That's why the air felt so wrong. He was poisoning her. He had locked her in here and was pumping this deadly gas into the room, planning to make it look like an accident. Chloe moaned weakly in my arms, her body trembling. I had to get her out. I had to get us both out. But Mark was blocking the only exit, and he was a big man, strong from his work as a construction manager. I was an old woman with bad knees. My mind raced, desperately searching for a way out, for anything I could say or do. "Why, Mark?" I pleaded, trying to buy time, to reach the man I thought I knew. "Why would you do this? I thought you loved her. We're family." For a flicker of a second, something changed in his eyes. A flash of something hard and bitter. "Family?" he repeated, and the word was a sneer. She was going to ruin everything. She was going to take it all away. "Take what away?" I asked, completely confused. Chloe was a librarian. They lived a comfortable, simple life. What could she possibly take? But he didn't answer. He just took another step down, now halfway down the staircase. The space was filling with his presence, with the threat of him. My eyes darted around the basement, looking for a weapon, any way to fight back. There were old paint cans, a rusty toolbox, some gardening tools leaning against the wall. But they were all too far away. I was trapped on the floor with my dying daughter. "Please, Mark," I begged, tears now streaming down my face, mixing with the grime on my cheeks. "Let me just get her some air. Let me take her to the hospital. You can leave. We won't tell anyone. Just let her live." He actually let out a short, harsh laugh. "You always were a sentimental old woman, Bev. You think this is negotiable? You saw the lock on the door. You're a witness." He shook his head slowly, as if disappointed. "Now it has to be both of you. A terrible, tragic accident. A mother and daughter, overcome by fumes while checking a leak." My blood ran cold. He wasn't just a monster. He was a calculating one. He had a story ready, a story that would make him the grieving husband. He was going to kill us both and get away with it. Just then, a memory flashed in my mind, so bright and clear it was like a lightning strike. It was from about 6 months ago. Chloe and I were having lunch at my house. She had been quiet, picking at her salad. I asked her if everything was okay. She forced a smile and said, "Of course, Mom. Just tired." But her eyes, her kind, empathetic eyes, had a sadness in them I hadn't seen before. When I pressed her, she just shook her head and said, "It's nothing. Just money stuff. Mark gets so stressed about it. I don't want to worry you. Money stuff." Was that it? Was that the everything she was going to ruin? The memory gave me a sliver of an idea. It was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was all I had. "The locket," I whispered, looking directly at Mark. He stopped. He had been about to take another step, but he froze. "What did you say?" "The silver locket," I said, my voice gaining a tiny bit of strength. "The one I gave Chloe for her 16th birthday. She told me she lost it months ago. She was heartbroken." His mask of calm finally cracked. A muscle in his jaw twitched. He didn't like this. He didn't like being thrown off his script. "What about it?" he snapped. "She didn't lose it, did she, Mark?" I said, holding his gaze. I was still clutching Chloe, feeling her shallow breaths against my chest. "She told me she thought she left it at the gym. But you pawned it, didn't you? I saw the receipt in your glove compartment last week when I was looking for a napkin. I didn't think anything of it then. I thought maybe you were selling some of your own old things." His face went pale. I had hit a nerve. It was a wild guess, based on that snippet of memory about money stress, and the fact that I really had seen a pawn shop receipt for a silver heart locket in his car. I had forgotten all about it until this very second. "That's none of your business," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. "It is my business." I fired back, the anger giving me courage. "You've been stealing from your own wife. Pawning her jewelry? What else have you taken? What else have you lied about?" The generator in the corner chugged on, pumping its deadly fumes into the room. Chloe coughed, a weak, wet sound that tore at my soul. We were running out of time. My distraction was working, but it wasn't enough. He was still between us and the door. Mark's eyes narrowed. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a cold, determined fury. My knowing his secret had just made him even more dangerous. "You think you're so smart?" he said, starting down the stairs again, faster now. "It doesn't matter. None of it matters. After today, there won't be anyone left to care about a stupid locket." He was at the bottom of the stairs now, his large frame filling the small space at the base of the steps. He was only 10 feet away from us. I held Chloe tighter, ready to throw my body over hers completely. But then a miracle happened. From upstairs, a loud, insistent sound pierced the heavy silence. It was the doorbell. Asterisk ding dong. Ding dong, asterisk. Mark jerked his head up, startled. His plan was unraveling, and he knew it. Someone was at the door. He hesitated, looking from us to the stairs and back again. His carefully constructed accident was now a messy, complicated problem. He couldn't let anyone else into the house. "Not now. Stay here," he snarled at us, as if we could go anywhere. He turned and bounded back up the stairs 2 at a time. I heard his heavy footsteps cross the living room above. This was our chance. Our only chance. The moment he was out of sight, I moved. I shoved against Chloe, trying to get her to sit up. "Chloe, baby, we have to move. Now. Can you help me?" Her eyes fluttered open. They were glazed with confusion and lack of oxygen, but they focused on my face. She gave a tiny, weak nod. Using every ounce of strength I had left, I hooked my hands under her arms and started to drag her across the rough concrete floor, away from the generator's hose, toward the bottom of the stairs. It was agonizingly slow. She was dead weight, and I was so old, so tired. My back screamed in protest, and my breath came in ragged pants, the bad air burning my own lungs. We had to get up those stairs. We had to get to the door before Mark came back. I finally managed to drag her to the foot of the staircase. I propped her up against the wall, her head lolling to the side. "Just hold on, baby," I whispered, patting her cheek. "Just hold on." I then turned and scrambled up the stairs on my hands and knees, ignoring the pain in my joints. I had to close that basement door. If I could lock him down here with his own poison, we might have a chance. I reached the top, my heart pounding. I could hear Mark's voice at the front door, talking to someone. His voice was raised, trying to get rid of whoever it was. My hand reached for the door, ready to slam it shut and shove the bolt home. But just as my fingers touched the wood, a large, powerful hand clamped around my ankle from below. I screamed as Mark yanked my leg hard. My grip on the doorframe slipped, and I tumbled backward, down the hard wooden steps, landing in a heap at the bottom right next to Chloe. A sharp, hot pain exploded in my side. I looked up, dizzy and disoriented. Mark stood over us, his face a twisted mask of rage. He had somehow gotten back to the basement without me hearing him. He must have run out the back door and come around, or maybe the person at the front door left quickly. He reached down and grabbed a heavy, metal wrench from the open toolbox I had spotted earlier. He hefted it in his hand, his knuckles white. "The timeline is officially ruined," he said, his voice a low, deadly whisper. "Now we do this the hard way." He raised the wrench high above his head, the metal glinting in the sliver of light from the doorway. I threw my arms over Chloe, squeezing my eyes shut, waiting for the blow to fall. The world narrowed to the glint of that metal wrench high above me. Time seemed to slow down, each second stretching into an eternity. I could see the grim determination in Mark's eyes, the sweat on his forehead, the way his shirt stretched tight across his shoulders. My body acted without my mind's permission, curling tighter over Chloe, making my old bones a shield for my child. I braced for the shattering pain, a prayer for her safety screaming silently in my head. But the blow never came. Instead, a sound broke through the thick, toxic air. It was the distinct, official-sounding rap of someone knocking hard on the front door, followed by a voice calling out, "Mr. Henderson? Police. Is everything all right in there? Police?" Mark froze, the wrench still held high. His eyes widened in pure, unadulterated panic. The calculated coolness he had before was completely gone, replaced by the terrified look of a cornered animal. The knocking came again, louder this time. "Mr. Henderson? We received a call about a possible disturbance. Open the door, please." A call? Who could have called? The person at the doorbell? A neighbor who saw me screech into the driveway? I didn't know and I didn't care. It was a miracle. A tiny, fragile thread of hope. Mark lowered the wrench slowly, his arm trembling. He looked from us to the stairs, his mind racing, the gears almost visible behind his frantic eyes. He couldn't kill us with the police right outside. The noise, the struggle, it would be impossible to explain. His perfect accident was now a shattered fantasy. He made a decision. With a furious, silent snarl, he dropped the wrench. It clattered loudly on the concrete, making both Chloe and I flinch. He then turned and ran back up the stairs, taking them two at a time. He didn't even look back at us. At the top, he pulled the basement door shut. Click. The sound was soft, but it was more final than a gunshot. He hadn't bolted it. He wouldn't dare with the police there. But he had closed it, plunging us back into near-total darkness, trapping us with the silent, chugging generator that was still pumping death into the room. The moment the door closed, I sprang into action. The pain in my side from my fall was a hot, sharp ache, but I ignored it. Adrenaline was coursing through me, a powerful fuel for my old body. "Chloe, the police are here," I whispered urgently, shaking her gently. "We're going to be okay. But we have to get away from this fumes. Can you crawl?" Her eyes were open, and the sound of the word police seemed to have cut through the fog in her brain. She nodded, a tiny, weak movement, but it was enough. I hooked my hands under her arms again, and with a strength I didn't know I possessed, I dragged her away from the base of the stairs, over to the far wall, as far from the generator's hose as we could get. The air was slightly better here, still foul and chemical-laden, but not as concentrated as right at the source. Above us, we could hear the muffled sounds of voices. Mark's trying to sound calm and reasonable. A deeper, official-sounding voice, the police officer. I couldn't make out the words, but I could hear the tone. The officer was persistent. Mark was trying to wave him away. I held Chloe close, her head resting on my shoulder. Her breathing was still shallow and too fast, but she was conscious. She clutched my sleeve with a weak hand. "Mom," she rasped, her voice barely a whisper. The money." "Shh, baby, don't try to talk," I said, stroking her hair. "Save your strength. Help is here." But she insisted, her eyes pleading with me in the gloom. "No, you need to know. He took it all." And as we huddled together in the dark, waiting for salvation, my daughter began to whisper her story. It was a story of betrayal not born of sudden rage, but of a slow, creeping poison, just like the gas in the room. "It started about a year ago," she explained, her words coming in broken, gasping phrases. "Mark had been acting strangely. He was the manager for a big construction company, overseeing projects all over the state. He started working later, becoming more secretive with his phone and his laptop. He said he was stressed about a new development, a large apartment complex his company was building on the outskirts of town. Then, small things began to disappear from their home. At first, it was little things. A silver picture frame. An antique vase she had inherited from her grandmother. He told her he had knocked them over and broken them, too embarrassed to tell her. She believed him. She was always so trusting. But then, her jewelry started to vanish. The locket I had given her was the first. Then a diamond bracelet her father had given her for college graduation. Mark claimed their house must have been burgled while they were at work, but nothing else was taken, and there were no signs of a break-in. He convinced her it was a clever thief, and he handled the police report himself, telling her it was pointless and they'd never recover the items. "I was so stupid, Mom," Chloe whispered, a tear tracing a clean path through the grime on her cheek. "I believed him. I always believed him. The real trouble started 2 months ago." Chloe, being a librarian, was meticulous and curious. She was helping a friend research local business records for a project and decided, on a whim, to look up the public filings for Mark's big project, the Northwood Apartments. What she found made her blood run cold. The project was failing. It was massively over budget, and there were liens filed against the property by unpaid subcontractors. But according to the company's own reports that Mark brought home, everything was on schedule and under budget. He was lying to his bosses. She confronted him that night. At first, he denied it. He told her she didn't understand the construction business. But she pressed him, showing him the documents she had printed from the library's database. That's when his mask slipped. The calm, loving husband vanished, replaced by a man she didn't recognize. He yelled. He accused her of spying on him. He told her he had taken the money, embezzled hundreds of thousands of dollars from the company, to cover bad investments he'd made, desperate gambles that had all gone wrong. He said he was going to pay it back, Chloe gasped, her body shaking with a cough. He said he just needed more time. But then, last week, I found a life insurance policy. Mom, it was for $1 million. And he had increased it. The pieces snapped together in my mind with a terrifying clarity. The embezzlement, the stolen items, the life insurance. He wasn't just trying to hide his crime. He was trying to profit from it. He was drowning in debt and saw murder as his only way out. He must have known you were going to expose him, I said, my voice thick with horror. She nodded weakly. I told him yesterday. I said he had to go to the police and confess. I said I would go with him, that we could get through it together. She started to cry softly. I thought I could save him. I thought my love could fix him. My heart broke for her. Her kindness, her empathy, the very things that made her my beautiful daughter, had been used as weapons against her. She believed in the good in people, even when it was no longer there. Suddenly, the voices upstairs grew louder. We could hear Mark's voice, raised and angry. I told you everything is fine. My wife and her mother are out shopping. Then the officer's voice, clear and firm. Sir, we need to verify that for ourselves. We have a witness who saw an elderly woman, a Beverly Wilson, enter the house in a state of distress over an hour ago and not come out. We need to speak to her and your wife. Now. Beverly Wilson, he used my name. Someone had seen me. Someone had been worried enough to call the police. A sob of relief caught in my throat. We heard scuffling sounds. A thud. Mark was losing control of the situation. You can't just barge in here, he yelled. This is a welfare check, sir. Step aside. This was our moment. We had to let them know we were here. We had to make noise. Chloe, we have to shout, I said, getting to my knees. We have to let them know we're down here. I filled my lungs, ignoring the burn, and screamed with every bit of strength I had left. Help! We're down here. In the basement. Help us. My voice was raw and raspy, but it was loud. Chloe joined me, her voice a thin, reedy cry, but together we were making noise. We were screaming, pounding our fists on the concrete floor. Our cries were met with immediate commotion from above. Shouting. The sound of heavy footsteps running. The basement, the officer yelled. The basement door was flung open so hard it slammed against the wall. Light flooded down the stairs, and for the first time, I saw the full, horrifying scene clearly. The generator, the hose, my daughter's pale, lifeless form, my own trembling hands. But standing in the doorway, backlit by the living room light, wasn't just the police officer. Behind him was another figure, a woman with a kind, worried face. It was my next-door neighbor, Linda. She was the witness. She must have seen me rush over and gotten concerned when I never returned. The officer, a young man with a determined look, started down the stairs. Ma'am, we're here. EMS is on the way. It was over. We were saved. But just as that thought filled me with a dizzying wave of relief, a new sound cut through the air. It was a guttural roar of pure rage from the top of the stairs. Mark shoved past the officer, his face a twisted nightmare of fury and desperation. He wasn't trying to explain anymore. He wasn't trying to hide. He had nothing left to lose. He leaped down the last few steps, his eyes locked not on me but on Chloe. In his hand, he had picked up the wrench again. You ruined everything, he screamed at her, charging across the basement floor. The police officer was caught off guard, stumbling on the steps. He was too far away. Mark raised the wrench, his intention clear. If he was going down, he was taking her with him. And this time, there was no one to stop the blow from falling. The world exploded into noise and motion. Mark's roar was an animal sound, ripped from a place of pure hatred. The wrench was a blur of metal in the dim light, arcing down toward my daughter's head. There was no time to think. There was only instinct. I threw my body over Chloe's, turning my back to the blow, squeezing my eyes shut. I felt the rush of air as the wrench swung down, and I braced for the impact that would shatter my bones, that would end me. But the impact never landed on me. There was a deafening bang. That was so loud and close it felt like it happened inside my own head. The sound echoed in the small, toxic space, stunning my ears. I flinched, waiting for the pain, but it didn't come. Instead, I heard a sharp cry of pain and the clatter of the wrench hitting the concrete floor again, this time followed by a heavier thud. I dared to open my eyes and look over my shoulder. Mark was on his knees, clutching his right hand. His face was a mask of shock and agony. The wrench lay beside him. Standing on the bottom step, his feet firmly planted, was the young police officer. He had his service weapon drawn, pointed at the ceiling now, and his face was pale but set in grim determination. A single, spent shell casing glittered on the step beside his foot. He hadn't shot Mark. He had fired a warning shot into the ceiling joist, the bullet tearing through the wood just inches from Mark's head. The shock and the sound, or maybe a fragment of splintered wood, had been enough to make Mark drop the wrench and clutch his injured hand. Don't move. Don't you move a muscle, the officer yelled, his voice ringing with authority. He kept his gun trained on Mark, as he quickly descended the rest of the steps. In a flash, he had kicked the wrench away and forced Mark onto his stomach, pulling his arms behind his back and clicking handcuffs into place. The fight seemed to drain out of Mark all at once. He went limp on the cold floor, his body shaking with silent sobs. The monster was gone, leaving only a broken, defeated man. The officer, whose name tag I could now read as Officer Miller, immediately turned his attention to us. His professional demeanor softened into one of urgent concern. "Ma'am, can you hear me? Help is here. Paramedics are right outside." I could only nod, my own body beginning to tremble uncontrollably now that the immediate danger had passed. The adrenaline was receding, leaving me weak and shivering. I looked down at Chloe. Her eyes were closed, but her chest was still rising and falling in those terrible, shallow breaths. The basement was suddenly full of people. 2 paramedics, a man and a woman, rushed down the stairs with a stretcher and oxygen tanks. Officer Miller quickly explained about the carbon monoxide. The paramedics worked with swift, efficient movements. They gently but firmly moved me aside so they could get to Chloe. I watched, huddled and useless, as they fitted a clear oxygen mask over her nose and mouth. The hiss of the pure, clean oxygen was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. They checked her pulse, her pupils, speaking to each other in low, quick medical terms I didn't understand. Then they lifted her onto the stretcher and started carrying her up the stairs. "Mom!" A weak voice called from the stretcher as they passed me. "I'm right here, baby," I said, stumbling to my feet, my side screaming in protest. "I'm right here. I'm coming with you." Officer Miller put a steadying hand on my arm. "Let them get her stabilized, ma'am. We'll get you to the hospital right behind her." He guided me up the basement stairs, away from the poisonous darkness. Stepping into the bright, normal-looking living room was like stepping into another universe. The sun was still shining through the windows. Buster was wagging his tail, being petted by my neighbor, Linda, who was crying quietly. She saw me and rushed over, pulling me into a tight hug. "Oh, Bev, I was so worried. When I saw you run over here and you never came back, and then I heard shouting, I just knew something was terrible wrong." "Thank you, Linda," I whispered, my voice hoarse from screaming and the fumes. "You saved our lives." I looked over at Mark. He was sitting on the sofa, handcuffed, his head bowed. Another officer was reading him his rights. He didn't look up at me. The man who had sat at my Thanksgiving table, who had helped me fix my leaky faucet, was now a stranger in handcuffs in his own living room. One of the paramedics came over to me. "Ma'am, we need to check you out too. You were exposed to the CO as well." They sat me down and put an oxygen mask on my face. The clean air felt like a cool, healing balm in my raw lungs. As I sat there, breathing deeply, watching the frantic but controlled activity around me, the full weight of what had happened began to crash down on me. The terror, the betrayal, the sheer luck that had brought Linda and the police to our door at the exact right moment. My body started to shake, and I couldn't stop it. Officer Miller knelt in front of me. "Mrs. Wilson? Beverly? You are incredibly brave. You saved your daughter's life." He paused. "We're going to need a statement from you when you're feeling up to it. But first, let's get you to the hospital to be with Chloe." The ride to the hospital in the ambulance was a blur of flashing lights and concerned faces. They wouldn't let me ride with Chloe. She was in a separate ambulance ahead of us, getting more intensive care. I was wrapped in a foil blanket, the oxygen mask still on, staring out the window at the ordinary world going by. People were driving their cars, mowing their lawns, living their lives. It felt surreal. At the hospital, everything was a whirlwind of white coats and bright lights. Doctors and nurses moved with purpose. I was checked over, my vitals taken, my lungs listened to. I had a nasty bruise forming on my side from my fall down the stairs, and I was suffering from mild carbon monoxide poisoning. But I would be okay. All I cared about was Chloe. They finally let me see her in the critical care unit. She was in a clear oxygen tent, and 4 in her arm, monitors beeping steadily beside her. She looked so small and pale in the big hospital bed, but the terrifying blue tint was gone from her lips. A doctor was with her, a woman with a kind, tired face. "Mrs. Wilson? I'm Dr. Evans," she said. "Your daughter is stable. She had a severe exposure to carbon monoxide. We're administering high-flow oxygen to flush the toxin from her bloodstream and help her tissues heal. The next 24 hours are critical, but she's a fighter. Her youth is on her side." Tears of relief poured down my face. "Can she hear me?" I asked. "Yes, she's in and out of consciousness, but she can likely hear you. Your voice will be a comfort to her." I pulled a chair up to her bedside and carefully reached through a special port in the plastic tent to hold her hand. Her skin was warm. I leaned close. "I'm here, Chloe," I whispered. "You're safe now. You're in the hospital. Everything is going to be okay. Just rest. Mommy's here." Her fingers twitched slightly in mine. It was the most wonderful feeling in the world. I must have dozed off in the chair because the next thing I knew, a gentle hand was shaking my shoulder. It was Officer Miller. He had a notebook in his hand and a sympathetic look on his face. "Mrs. Wilson, I'm so sorry to bother you," he said softly. "But we need to get your statement while the details are fresh. It's important for the case against Mr. Henderson." I nodded, wiping the sleep from my eyes. I looked at Chloe, sleeping peacefully under the oxygen tent, and then back at the officer. I knew I had to do this. For her. I told him everything. From the strange text message to finding the bolt on the door, to the generator, to Mark's confession in the basement, and Chloe's story about the embezzlement and the life insurance policy. Officer Miller listened carefully, writing it all down. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "That's quite a story. It matches what we're finding. We have a warrant to search the house and his office computers. We've already found evidence of the stolen jewelry at a local pawn shop, and our financial crimes unit is digging into the company's books." He looked at me with respect. "You were very observant. That bit about the locket receipt, that was smart." "It was just a mother's fear," I said quietly. He left soon after, promising to keep me updated. The room was quiet again, save for the steady beep of Chloe's heart monitor and the soft hiss of oxygen. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I felt 100 years old. I held Chloe's hand and watched her sleep, each breath a gift. We had survived the extreme event. We were in the calm after the storm. The police had Mark. Chloe was getting the care she needed. It felt, for the first time in hours, like the nightmare might truly be over. But just as that thought settled in my mind, my phone, which someone had thankfully retrieved from my car and given to me, buzzed on the bedside table. I picked it up, expecting a text from Linda checking in. It wasn't from Linda. It was from an unknown number. The message was short, and it made the food I'd managed to eat earlier turn to a stone in my stomach. "Did you really think it was over?" The message read. "He didn't work alone. You and your daughter are still a liability. Watch your back." I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. My eyes darted to the doorway of the hospital room, half expecting to see a shadowy figure standing there. The extreme event was over. But a new one, more shadowy and terrifying, had just begun. The words on the phone screen seemed to pulse with a malevolent life of their own. "Did you really think it was over? He didn't work alone. You and your daughter are still a liability. Watch your back." My breath caught in my throat. The steady, reassuring beep of Chloe's heart monitor suddenly sounded like a countdown. The sterile, safe hospital room felt like a glass box, exposed and vulnerable. My hands trembled so violently I almost dropped the phone. I stared at the unknown number, a string of digits that felt like a snake coiled in my hand. He didn't work alone. The thought was like a second poisoning, seeping into my mind and spreading a new kind of fear. Mark wasn't a lone monster. He had a partner. Someone who knew what he had planned. Someone who knew it had failed. And now that someone knew we were alive, that we could talk, that we could identify them. My head snapped up, my eyes scanning the doorway of the hospital room. The hallway was bright and empty, but every shadow seemed to hold a threat. A nurse walked by, her shoes squeaking on the polished floor, and I jumped. My heart was hammering again, a frantic, terrified rhythm. I felt a primal urge to throw my body over Chloe's bed, to protect her from this new, invisible enemy. I had to tell someone. I stumbled out of the chair, my legs weak, and rushed to the door. I looked up and down the hall. A different police officer, an older one with a graying mustache, was sitting in a chair a few doors down, assigned to keep an eye on us. I waved frantically at him. "Officer! Officer, please!" He was on his feet immediately, his hand resting on his belt as he hurried over. "Mrs. Wilson? What's wrong? Is it your daughter?" I thrust the phone at him, my hand shaking. "This. I just got this." He took the phone, his eyes narrowing as he read the message. His expression turned grim. Okay, stay calm. I need to call this in." He spoke into his radio, his voice low and urgent, relaying the number and the message. He then handed the phone back to me. "We'll have this number traced. Until we know more, we're going to increase security. No one comes in or out of this room without my explicit approval. You have my word." His words were meant to be comforting, but they only confirmed the danger. We needed guarding. We were targets. I went back to Chloe's bedside, pulling my chair closer to her, my body between her and the door. I felt like a mother bird guarding her chick, every sense on high alert. The peaceful calm I had felt just minutes ago was utterly shattered. The nightmare had a new chapter, and I didn't know who was writing it. Over the next few hours, the hospital became a fortress. The officer outside our door was joined by another. Nurses had to be cleared before entering. The normal, quiet routine of the CCU was replaced by a tense, watchful atmosphere. I kept holding Chloe's hand, my grip tight, as if I could transfer my own feeble strength into her. Later that evening, a familiar face appeared at the door, Officer Miller. He looked tired but determined. He showed his badge to the officer on duty and was let in. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, pulling up a chair. "We traced the number. It was a disposable, pay-as-you-go phone. Purchased with cash at a convenience store across town 2 days ago. Untraceable. My hope, a small, flickering candle, sputtered and died. So we have no idea who sent it. Not from the number, no," he admitted. "But the message itself tells us a lot. It confirms that Mark Henderson had an accomplice. This wasn't just a crime of passion or sudden desperation. It was planned. The embezzlement at his company was sophisticated. It's possible he needed help from someone inside to pull it off, to hide the transactions." He opened a folder he was carrying. "We've been digging into his life. His financial records, his phone logs, his work colleagues. We found large, regular cash withdrawals over the past 6 months. We also found frequent calls to one number in particular, a man named Jason Miller." He paused. "No relation to me. Jason Miller works as an accountant at the same construction company as your son-in-law." An accountant. It made a terrible, perfect sense. An accountant could help hide the stolen money, could create false reports, could be the inside man. "Have you arrested him?" I asked, my voice tight. "We brought him in for questioning this afternoon," Officer Miller said. "But we had to let him go. We have no direct evidence linking him to the attack on you and your daughter." He denied everything. Said he and Mark were just work friends who occasionally talked about sports. He had an alibi for this morning. He was in a meeting with half the office. We have nothing to hold him on. The accomplice was out there. He knew we were alive, and he was free. "The message says, you and your daughter are still a liability," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "He's not going to stop, is he?" Officer Miller's face was serious. "We will do everything in our power to protect you, Mrs. Wilson. We're putting a detail on both of you. We're also pressing Mark Henderson hard. He's lawyered up and isn't talking, but maybe the threat of a murder charge, plus conspiracy, will make him reconsider his silence. Sometimes, when faced with life in prison, people start looking for deals." After he left, the night stretched before me, long and terrifying. Every time a cart rolled by in the hall, every time the shift changed, my heart leaped into my throat. I didn't sleep. I just watched Chloe, and I watched the door. The next morning, a miracle happened. The doctor, Dr. Evans, came in for her rounds and decided Chloe was stable enough to be taken out of the oxygen tent. They switched her to a regular nasal cannula. Her color was better, a healthy pink returning to her cheeks. And when her eyes fluttered open, they were clear. They focused on my face, and she gave me a weak but genuine smile. "Mom," she said, her voice raspy but audible. Tears of relief streamed down my face. I leaned over and kissed her forehead. "Oh, my sweet girl. I'm here." She was groggy and confused, and the nurses said her memory of the event might be patchy due to the oxygen deprivation. I didn't mention the text message. I didn't mention the accomplice. She needed to heal. She needed to feel safe, even if I no longer could. For the next 2 days, we existed in a small, guarded bubble. Chloe grew stronger. She could sit up, she could eat soft foods, she could hold a conversation. We talked about everything except what had happened in the basement. We talked about my garden, about the books she was ordering for the library, about happy memories from her childhood. It was a low, peaceful time, a gentle reprieve in the eye of the storm. I almost let myself believe we could just hide in this room forever. On the 3rd day, Officer Miller returned. His expression was grim. "We got a break," he said without preamble. "Mark Henderson wants to talk. He'll give us the name of his accomplice in exchange for a plea deal, a reduced sentence." My body went cold. This was it. This was how we would end this. "But there's a condition," Officer Miller continued, his eyes meeting mine. "He doesn't trust us to relay the information. He says his accomplice is too connected, that word might get out. He'll only give the name to one person. He'll only talk to you, Mrs. Wilson." The air rushed from my lungs as if I'd been punched. The room, which had started to feel almost safe, suddenly tilted on its axis. I could feel Chloe's hand stiffen in mine. "Me," I whispered, my voice cracking. "He wants to talk to me?" Officer Miller nodded, his face a mask of professional neutrality, though I could see the unease in his eyes. "His lawyer conveyed the message an hour ago. He's insisting. He says you're the only one he'll give the name to. He says he owes you that much." He almost sneered the last part. "He doesn't owe me anything except a life sentence," I said, a hot flare of anger cutting through my fear. The audacity of that man to make a demand, to think he could summon me after what he'd done. "No, absolutely not. I'm not going anywhere near him." "Mom!" Chloe's voice was small and frightened. She was looking at me, her eyes wide. The confusion and fear were back, cutting through the medication-induced haze. "What's happening? What name?" I squeezed her hand, my mind racing. I hadn't told her about the text message. I hadn't told her that the man who tried to kill her had a partner still on the outside. I had wanted to protect her, to let her heal. Now the ugly truth was crashing into our fragile bubble of recovery. I took a deep breath. She deserved to know. She was stronger now. I explained it as gently as I could. The text message. The untraceable phone. The accountant, Jason Miller, who was questioned and released. And now Mark's offer. Chloe listened, her face growing paler with every word. When I finished, she was silent for a long moment, staring at the blank hospital room wall. Then she turned to me, and her eyes, though scared, were clear and determined. "You have to go," she said quietly. I stared at her, stunned. "Chloe, no. I can't. I won't leave you. And I certainly won't go sit in a room with that monster." "Mom, listen," she said, her voice gaining strength. "This person, this accomplice, he texted you. He knows who we are, where we are. He said we're a liability. As long as he's out there, we're not safe. You and I both know that." She looked at Officer Miller. "The police can't protect us forever. They need a name. They need evidence. This might be the only way to get it." Tears welled in my eyes. Her empathy, her incredible strength, was shining through even now. She was thinking of our future safety, of ending this nightmare for good, even if it meant sending her mother into the lion's den. "It's a trick, Chloe," I pleaded. "He's manipulating us. He wants to hurt me. He wants to get to you through me." "It might be," Officer Miller interjected carefully. "And we would never force you to do this, Mrs. Wilson. It's entirely your decision. But we would have complete control of the situation. It would be in a secure interrogation room at the county jail. You would be behind reinforced glass. He would be in handcuffs, shackled to the floor. There would be 2 armed deputies in the room with him, and I would be right there with you on our side of the glass. You would be perfectly safe. Physically, at least." The thought of seeing his face again, of being in the same building, made my skin crawl. I could still smell the chemical stench of the basement, still feel the cold concrete under my knees. But I looked at my daughter. I saw the shadow of fear in her eyes, a fear that would never truly leave if this other man wasn't caught. She was right. We couldn't live the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, jumping at every text message. I took a deep, shuddering breath. The kind, peaceful part of me, the part that just wanted to tend to my garden and do my puzzles, wanted to say no. But the mother in me, the fierce, protective lioness, knew what had to be done. "Okay," I said, the word feeling like gravel in my throat. "I'll do it." The preparations felt like a dream, a bad dream where everything moved too slowly and too quickly at the same time. I was given a Kevlar vest to wear under my blouse, a humiliating and terrifying reminder of the danger. Officer Miller drove me to the county jail in his unmarked car, a silent, grim journey. The jail was a stark, modern building of gray concrete and steel, a world away from my cozy home with its blooming petunias. We were led through a maze of buzzing electronic doors and echoing corridors until we reached a small, dark room. On one wall was a large, one-way mirror. On the other side was the interrogation room, a sterile, windowless box with a metal table bolted to the floor and 2 chairs. My heart was a wild drum in my chest. I felt dizzy. Officer Miller guided me to a chair facing the glass. "Just breathe, Beverly," he said softly. "You're in control. You don't have to say anything you don't want to. Remember, he can't see or hear you. This is just so you can hear his offer directly." A few moments later, the door on the other side of the glass opened. 2 large deputies escorted Mark in. He was wearing a bright orange jumpsuit, his hands and feet shackled. The chains clinked with every slow, shuffling step he took. He looked smaller, somehow deflated. The arrogant, furious man from the basement was gone. This was just a tired, defeated man in a prison uniform. He sat down in the chair, the deputies positioning themselves on either side of him, their arms crossed. He stared straight ahead, at his own reflection in the mirror, knowing we were on the other side. A speaker on the wall crackled to life. We could hear every sound from the other room, the hum of the lights, the rustle of his jumpsuit. Officer Miller picked up a small microphone. "Mark, Beverly Wilson is here, as you requested. You have something to say to her." Mark's eyes, hollow and shadowed, seemed to look right through the glass and into my soul. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and raspy when he spoke. "Bev," he said. I'm sorry." A fire ignited in my belly. Sorry? He was sorry? For trying to murder my daughter? For planning to kill me? I gripped the edges of my chair, my knuckles turning white, but I stayed silent. He continued, his words tumbling out in a rushed, desperate stream. "I never meant for any of this to happen. It got out of control. The money. I was in a hole. I was scared. Jason Miller, the accountant, he was the one. He came up with the plan to skim from the project funds. He said it was easy, that no one would ever know. But then Chloe, she started asking questions. She was going to ruin everything, expose us. Jason, he was the one who suggested the accident. He said it was the only way out. He pressured me. He threatened me. He was crying now, real tears tracing paths down his face. It was a performance, a pathetic, self-serving performance, and every fiber of my being rejected it. He was trying to paint himself as a victim, manipulated by this Jason Miller. "He's the dangerous one, Bev," Mark pleaded, his eyes wide with what looked like genuine fear. "Not me. I was just weak. I made a mistake. But Jason, he's cold. He has contacts. He's the one who sent that text. He's the one you have to worry about. I'm giving you his name, Jason Miller. Now, please tell them I cooperated. Tell them I gave you what you wanted. I don't want to die in here." I had heard enough. The sight of him, the sound of his voice, the lies falling so easily from his lips, it was making me sick. I looked at Officer Miller and gave a sharp, single nod. Officer Miller keyed the microphone. "The message has been received, Mark. Your lawyer will be informed of your cooperation." He gestured for me to leave. I stood up on shaky legs, turning my back on the pathetic figure in the orange jumpsuit. I never wanted to see him again. As we walked back down the sterile hallway, a strange sense of anticlimax settled over me. We had a name, Jason Miller. The same name they already had. Had it been worth it? Had facing my demon given us anything new? Officer Miller seemed to read my thoughts. "It confirms our primary suspect," he said. "And his statement, recorded and given in exchange for a deal, is now evidence we can use against Jason Miller. We can bring him back in. We can pressure him with Mark's testimony. This was a big step, Beverly. You were incredibly brave." He drove me back to the hospital. The whole way, I stared out the window, feeling numb and hollow. I had done it. I had faced the man who tried to destroy my family. I had gotten the name. The low, calm event of the past few days was over, and we had navigated a new extreme. It was supposed to be over. When we arrived back at Chloe's room, the officer on duty nodded at us and stepped aside. I pushed the door open, eager to see my daughter, to tell her it was done, that we had what we needed. But the room was in chaos. A nurse was bent over Chloe, who was coughing violently, her body convulsing. The heart monitor was beeping erratically. Chloe's face was flushed a deep, alarming red, and she was clawing at her throat. "What's happening?" I screamed, rushing to the bedside. The nurse looked up, her face etched with panic. "She can't breathe. It's a severe anaphylactic reaction. We need epinephrine now." Another nurse rushed in with a syringe, jabbing it into Chloe's thigh. I stood there, frozen in horror, watching my daughter fight for air all over again. My eyes fell on the bedside table. Next to a pitcher of water was a small, clear plastic cup. In it were a few leftover ice chips from her lunch. And nestled among the melting ice, almost invisible, was a single crushed peanut. Time stopped. The world narrowed to the sight of that single, crushed peanut, a tiny brown speck against the white ice that held the power to kill my daughter. The nurses worked frantically, a whirl of blue scrubs and urgent voices. Another epinephrine pen. Oxygen mask. Steroids pumped into her fore. "Her throat is closing. We need to intubate," someone yelled. I was shoved aside, my back hitting the wall as a doctor rushed in. I could only watch, my hand clamped over my mouth, as they worked to save Chloe's life for the second time in a week. The parallel was too cruel, too horrifying. First, poison air. Now, poison food. She was being hunted. Officer Miller, who had just walked me back, burst into action. He started barking orders into his radio, his face a thundercloud. "I want a lockdown on this floor. No one in or out. I want to know who brought that ice chip cup into this room." The medical team managed to intubate Chloe, pushing a breathing tube down her throat to keep her airway open. The frantic beeping of the monitor slowly steadied into a more normal rhythm. Her flushed color began to fade. She was unconscious again, but she was alive. The doctor, sweating and pale, turned to me. "We've stabilized her, but it was a close call. A very severe reaction. She's sedated now and back on full respiratory support. We'll run tests to see if there's any lasting damage." He looked at the cup, now sealed in a plastic bag an officer was holding. "How did this happen?" "Her chart is flagged with a severe peanut allergy. This is a nut-free floor." "That's what we're going to find out," Officer Miller said, his voice like steel. The next few hours were a blur of controlled chaos. The hospital was in an uproar. The police sealed off the floor and began interviewing every nurse, aide, and orderly who had been anywhere near the room. They confiscated the trash, reviewed the food service logs, and began pulling security camera footage from the hallways. I sat by Chloe's bedside again, holding her limp hand, feeling a despair so deep I thought I would drown in it. We had a name. We thought we were closing in. And yet, the enemy had walked right past armed guards and into her room to try and kill her. He had used her greatest vulnerability against her. The cruelty of it took my breath away. Officer Miller came back into the room, his expression even grimmer than before. "The ice chips," he said without preamble. "They weren't from the hospital's food service. The dietary aide who brought her lunch tray confirmed it. The cup wasn't one of ours. Someone brought it in from the outside." My blood ran cold. "From the outside? But how?" "The guards. We're reviewing the footage now," he said. "But it seems the person who did this was clever. They didn't look like a threat." An hour later, we were in a small hospital administration office, crowded around a computer monitor. The black and white video showed the hallway outside Chloe's room. We saw the officer sitting dutifully in his chair. We saw nurses coming and going. Then we saw her. A woman walked into view. She was older, maybe in her 60s, with kind eyes and soft, gray hair pulled into a bun. She wore a volunteer's smock over her clothes, the same smock worn by the pink ladies who delivered flowers and books to patients. She carried a small tray with a single cup of iced chips and a gentle smile. She walked right up to the officer. The audio was faint, but we could hear her. "Hello, officer. So good of you to be watching over our poor girl. She must be so thirsty. The nurse asked me to bring this in." The officer, seeing the familiar smock, the grandmotherly demeanor, simply nodded and waved her through. He never checked the cup. Why would he? She looked like someone's sweet grandma. She looked like me. I watched, my stomach churning, as the woman disappeared into Chloe's room. She was inside for less than 30 seconds. Then she came out without the cup, gave the officer another smile, and walked away down the hall. "She was a ghost," Officer Miller muttered, rewinding the tape. "We've checked with the volunteer office. They have no record of her. That smock was stolen 2 days ago from a laundry cart. She walked in the main entrance, blended in, and walked right out. No one noticed her. It was Jason Miller. It had to be. He hadn't come himself. He had sent someone else. An accomplice to the accomplice. A woman who could walk through security without raising an eyebrow. The web was getting wider and more sinister. We were back to square one. No, we were worse than square one. Now we knew the enemy could get to us anywhere, even in a guarded hospital room. The feeling of safety was a complete illusion. The rest of the day was a long, slow agony of fear. Chloe remained sedated and on the ventilator. The doctors were hopeful she would make a full recovery, but the emotional trauma was immeasurable. I didn't leave her side for a second. I watched every person who entered the room with a new, sharp suspicion. Later that evening, Officer Miller returned with an update. "We've put out a bolo for the woman from the video. We're also bringing Jason Miller in for questioning again, now that we have Mark's statement and this attempted murder. We have more leverage this time." It was a small hope, but I clung to it. Maybe this would be the break we needed. As night fell, the hospital quieted. The shift changed. A new, younger officer was posted outside the door. The rhythmic hiss and beep of the machines became the only sound. Exhaustion finally overtook me, and I fell into a fitful sleep in the chair, still holding Chloe's hand. I was jolted awake by a soft sound. It was the door to the room slowly swinging open. The new, young officer was standing there, but something was wrong. His face was pale and beaded with sweat. His eyes were wide with terror. And standing behind him, hidden from the view of anyone in the hall, was a man. The man had one hand firmly in the pocket of his jacket, pointed at the officer's back. In his other hand, he held a small, black handgun pressed against the officer's side. The man was in his 40s with a clean-cut, professional look. He had thinning brown hair and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like an accountant. He looked exactly like the photo Officer Miller had shown me of Jason Miller. He smiled at me, a cold, empty smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Hello, Beverly," he said, his voice quiet and calm. "I believe you have something I need, and I'm not leaving without it." The world shrunk to the space between the door and my daughter's hospital bed. Jason Miller's calm voice was more terrifying than any shout could ever be. The young officer, whose name I suddenly remembered was Officer Davis, stood rigid, his eyes pleading with me from a face pale with fear. My body went cold. Every instinct screamed to throw myself over Chloe, but I was frozen in my chair, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The gun in Jason's hand looked small and deadly. "What?" My voice was a dry croak. I cleared my throat, forcing strength into it. "What could I possibly have that you want?" Jason's cold smile didn't waver. He nudged Officer Davis further into the room, using him as a shield, and kicked the door shut behind him. The click of the latch was final. We were trapped. "Don't play dumb, Beverly. It doesn't suit you," he said, his tone conversational, as if we were discussing the weather. "My foolish partner sang like a canary, I hear. Gave you my name. But names are just words. What I need is the proof." Mark was sentimental and stupid. He kept a little insurance file, a flash drive, records of our transactions, some incriminating emails. He told me he hid it somewhere safe. "I've turned his house upside down. It's not there." "Which means," he said, his eyes locking onto mine, "your daughter must have it. Or you do." The flash drive. Chloe had never mentioned a flash drive. But her story about the records, the documents she found at the library, she must have found the real evidence, too. She must have taken it for safekeeping, and Mark never knew. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my mind racing. It was a lie, and he knew it. He sighed, a sound of exaggerated patience. He pressed the gun harder into Officer Davis's side, making the young man whimper. "Let's not do this. I've had a very long day. First, I had to deal with Mark's emotional meltdown. Then, I had to clean up his mess with your daughter. And now I have to have this conversation." He glanced at Chloe, lying vulnerable and unconscious on the bed. "The next step is very simple. I start breaking his fingers." He jerked his head toward Officer Davis. "And if that doesn't jog your memory, I unplug one of these very interesting machines keeping your daughter alive. We'll see how long it takes for her to miss it." A wave of pure, undiluted hatred washed over me. This man wasn't just a criminal. He was a predator who enjoyed his own cruelty. He saw people as objects, as problems to be solved. My fear began to harden into a cold, sharp resolve. I would not let him hurt anyone else. "Wait," I said, holding up a hand. I had to buy time. I had to think. "Just wait. Don't hurt him." Chloe, she was barely conscious. She couldn't have told me anything. But after I found her in the basement, I went to her house. Before the police got there, I was looking for answers. I found a small, silver flash drive in her jewelry box. I didn't know what it was. I thought it was just photos. It was a gamble. A desperate, wild gamble. I had seen no such thing. But her jewelry box was the first place I would have looked if I were her, hiding something from her husband. Jason's eyes lit up with a greedy fire. "Where is it?" he demanded, his calm facade cracking for the first time. "It's not here," I said, my voice steadier now. I was scared. After what happened, I didn't know who to trust. "I hid it." "Where?" he snapped, taking a step forward, pushing Officer Davis ahead of him. "At my house," I said quickly. "In my freezer, tucked inside a bag of frozen peas." It was a cliché hiding spot, but sometimes clichés are clichés because they work. He studied my face, his eyes narrowed, searching for a lie. I tried to look like a terrified old woman who had just given up her biggest secret. I must have been convincing, because he nodded slowly. "Fine. We're all going to take a little trip to your house," he said. "You." He shoved Officer Davis toward the chair I had been sitting in. "Sit down. Put your hands on the armrests." Officer Davis, trembling, did as he was told. In a swift, brutal motion, Jason produced a zip tie from his pocket and secured the officer's wrists to the metal arms of the chair. He then ripped a long strip of medical tape from a roll on the bedside cart and slapped it over Davis's mouth. "Now," Jason said, turning his full attention to me. The gun was now pointed directly at my chest. "You and I are going to walk out of here. You're going to look calm. You're going to tell anyone who asks that I'm a family friend giving you a ride home for a shower and a change of clothes. If you try to signal anyone, if you so much as twitch the wrong way, I will put a bullet in you and then I will come back here and finish what I started with your daughter. Do you understand? I looked at Chloe, at the tube helping her breathe, at the steady beep of her heart monitor. I looked at Officer Davis, tied and helpless, his eyes wide with terror. I had no choice. I had to lead this monster away from them. I understand, I said. He gestured with the gun. Let's go. And bring your purse. It'll look more natural. I picked up my purse from the floor, my hands shaking. I walked toward the door, Jason falling in step just behind me, the gun now hidden in his jacket pocket, but undoubtedly still pointed at my back. We stepped out into the hallway. It was quiet, the night shift nurses at their station down the hall. One of them looked up and smiled. Heading out for a bit, Beverly? I forced a weary, grateful smile onto my face. It felt like a grotesque mask. Yes, dear. This is my nephew, Jason. He's going to take me home for a little while. I need a proper shower and my own bed for a few hours. Oh, that's wonderful, the nurse said warmly. You deserve it. We'll take good care of Chloe. Thank you, I said, my voice thick with a fear I hoped she would mistake for emotion. We walked down the hall toward the elevators. Every step felt like walking a plank. I could feel the pressure of the gun in my back. My mind was screaming for a way out, for a way to alert someone. But the hallway was empty. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime. We stepped inside, alone. The moment the doors closed, Jason's false pleasantness vanished. You did good, he muttered. Now keep it up. The ride down to the lobby was silent and suffocating. We walked through the bright, mostly empty lobby. A security guard nodded at us. We pushed through the glass doors and out into the cool night air. His car, a nondescript gray sedan, was parked illegally near the entrance. Get in the passenger side, he ordered. I did as I was told, my body moving on autopilot. He got in the driver's side, started the car, and pulled smoothly away from the hospital. As we drove off, I looked back at the building, a fortress that had failed to protect us. My daughter was in there, helpless, and I was leaving with the man who wanted her dead. We drove in silence for several minutes, leaving the bright lights of the hospital behind and moving into the quieter, darker residential streets of Cedar Rapids. The tension in the car was a physical thing, a thick fog of fear and hatred. This was the less extreme event, the dreadful calm between the storms. I was his prisoner, being taken to a place he thought held his salvation. But my house didn't hold a flash drive. It only held a bag of frozen peas. And when he discovered that, his rage would be unimaginable. I had to do something. Now, while we were still in the car, while there was still a chance. I saw my opportunity. We were approaching a red light. A police cruiser was sitting in the lane next to us. It was now or never. As we slowed to a stop, I took a deep, silent breath. I looked at Jason, who was watching the light, his grip tight on the steering wheel. Then, with a sudden violent movement, I threw my entire body across the center console and grabbed the steering wheel with both hands. I yanked it with all my might, hard to the right, aiming straight for the side of the police cruiser. The tires screeched. Jason roared in surprise and fury. The world erupted in a scream of tearing metal and shattering glass as our car slammed into the side of the police car. The world became a violent, deafening explosion of sound and force. My body was thrown forward, the seat belt locking and cutting hard into my shoulder and chest. The airbag erupted from the steering wheel with a deafening bang and a cloud of white powder, smashing into Jason and then into me. The sound of crunching metal and shattering glass screamed in my ears. For a moment, there was only stunned silence and disorientation. My head was ringing. The white powder from the airbag coated everything, making it look like a freak snowstorm had hit the inside of the car. I tasted blood in my mouth where I'd bitten my cheek. Then the screaming started. Not from me and not from Jason. It was from outside the car. People on the street were yelling. Car horns were blaring. Next to me, Jason was groaning. The airbag had smashed his glasses, and a cut above his eyebrow was leaking blood down his face. He was dazed, shaking his head, trying to clear it. The gun was no longer in his hand. It had fallen to the floor somewhere in the impact. This was my chance. I fumbled for the seatbelt release, my fingers clumsy and shaking. I shoved my shoulder against the car door, but it was jammed shut, bent in the frame from the impact. I was trapped. I looked out the shattered windshield. We had T-boned the police cruiser right in the driver's side door. The officer inside was moving, but dazed, his head resting against the window. Jason recovered faster than I thought possible. He blinked, his eyes focusing on me with pure, undiluted hatred. He ignored the blood trickling into his eye and started patting the floor frantically, searching for the gun. "My face," he snarled, his voice thick with rage. "You ruined my face." His fingers closed around the grip of the gun, just as a voice boomed from outside. "Freeze! Police! Show me your hands." The officer from the passenger side of the cruiser was out of the car, his service weapon drawn and aimed directly at our vehicle. His partner was still struggling to get his own door open on the damaged side. Jason froze. He looked at the gun in his hand, then at the armed officer, then at me. The calculus of his situation was changing by the second. He was cornered, but a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. In one fluid, terrifying motion, he didn't raise his hands. Instead, he lunged across the car at me, his body slamming me against the jammed door. He wrapped his left arm around my neck in a choke hold, using my body as a shield. With his right hand, he raised the gun and pressed the barrel hard against my temple. The cold metal felt like a kiss of death. "Back off!" he screamed at the officer, his voice shrill and panicked now. "Back off or I put a hole in her head. I swear to God I will." The officer outside tightened his two-handed grip on his weapon, his aim now shifting over Jason's shoulder, looking for a clean shot he would never get. "Let her go. There's nowhere to run. Watch me," Jason yelled. He shoved the gun harder against my head. "You! Open your door. Now!" My door was jammed. I pushed against it with all my might, but it wouldn't budge. "It's stuck," I gasped, his arm crushing my windpipe. He swore violently and shifted, turning us both toward his own door. He kicked it open, dragging me out with him into the street. He kept my body between himself and the police officer, using me as a human barricade. The scene was chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Bystanders were filming on their phones. The officer from the damaged cruiser had finally kicked his door open and stumbled out, drawing his own weapon. Now there were 2 guns trained on us. "Let the woman go, Jason," the first officer yelled, using his name. They knew who he was. "It's over." "It's not over until I say it's over," Jason screamed back. He started walking backward, dragging me with him, his steps clumsy and hurried. He was heading toward the sidewalk, toward the cover of the buildings. "I need a car. Get me a car or she dies." He was pulling me into a narrow alley between a laundromat and a closed-down bookstore. The darkness swallowed us. The police officers followed, but carefully, their guns raised. The alley was a dead end. I knew because I'd lived in this town my whole life. It ended at a brick wall behind the old movie theater. He was trapping himself, and he was taking me with him. He backed us all the way to the end until my back was pressed against the cold, rough bricks. The police officers stopped at the mouth of the alley, using the corners of the buildings for cover. Red and blue lights now painted the street behind them, reflecting off the windows. More police had arrived. We were in a standoff. "There's nowhere to go, Jason," an amplified voice boomed. A police sergeant was using a megaphone. "Let the hostage go and come out with your hands up." Jason was breathing in ragged, panicked gasps against my ear. His sweat and blood smeared on my neck. The gun never wavered from my temple. "Shut up," he yelled into the darkness, his voice echoing off the close walls. "Just shut up." He was cracking. The cool, calculating accountant was gone, replaced by a desperate, terrified man with nothing left to lose. That made him infinitely more unpredictable and dangerous. "Beverly," he whispered, his voice a harsh rasp in my ear. "You lied to me, didn't you?" "There is no flash drive." I didn't answer. I was concentrating on breathing, on staying conscious. The brick wall was cold against my back, a stark contrast to the heat of his panic. "It doesn't matter now," he said, almost to himself. "None of it matters. But I'm not going to prison. I'm not spending my life in a cage." His arm tightened around my neck. This was it. He knew he was finished, and he was going to take me with him as his final act of spite. I closed my eyes, thinking of Chloe. I hoped she would be safe. I hoped she would be happy. But then, a different sound cut through the tense silence. It wasn't a siren. It wasn't a megaphone. It was a soft, scraping sound from above. Jason heard it too. His head jerked up, looking at the fire escape 3 stories above us. A figure was moving there, silhouetted against the night sky. It was Officer Miller. He must have come through one of the adjacent buildings and climbed up. He was on the fire escape, moving with silent, deliberate care, his rifle aimed down into the alley. Jason saw him. His eyes widened in shock and fury. He swung the gun away from my head, aiming it upward at Officer Miller. It was the split-second distraction I needed. I drove my elbow backward with every ounce of strength I had left, jamming it hard into his ribs. He grunted in pain and surprise, his grip loosening for a fraction of a second. That was all I needed. I dropped my weight, slipping down and out of his chokehold. As I fell to the dirty pavement, I heard two sounds almost simultaneously. A single sharp crack from above, and a wet, sickening thud from beside me. I looked up. Jason was staggering backward, a dark, spreading stain blossoming on the shoulder of his jacket. Officer Miller's shot had found its mark. The gun clattered from his hand onto the asphalt. He looked down at the wound, then at me, his expression one of utter astonishment. Then his legs gave way, and he collapsed to the ground, clutching his shoulder and moaning in pain. Police officers swarmed into the alley, shouting, their guns trained on him. They kicked his gun away and rolled him onto his stomach, cuffing his hands behind his back despite his injury. Officer Miller was already scrambling down the fire escape. He reached me as I sat trembling on the ground, unable to stand. He knelt beside me, his face full of concern. "Beverly? Are you hit? Are you okay?" I could only shake my head, tears of relief and shock and delayed terror now streaming down my face. I wasn't okay. I was far from okay. But I was alive. The extreme event was over. Jason Miller was in custody. The immediate threat was gone. As they loaded him into an ambulance, he looked at me, his eyes filled with a promise of undying hatred even in defeat. The police helped me to my feet, wrapping a blanket around my shoulders. I was bruised, cut, and traumatized, but physically I would survive. It felt like the end of a long, horrible war. But as I was led out of the alley, toward a waiting paramedic, my phone, still in my purse which had been in the car, buzzed. A nurse from the hospital was calling. My heart leaped into my throat. "Chloe." I answered, my voice trembling. "Hello. Is it Chloe? Is she okay?" The nurse's voice was calm but urgent. "Mrs. Wilson, Chloe is physically stable. But when we removed the sedation, she became extremely agitated. She's awake, and she's desperate to talk to you. She keeps saying one thing over and over." "What?" I asked, my blood running cold. "What is she saying?" "She keeps saying, he has a partner. The woman. Mom, he has a partner." The nurse's words echoed in my mind, a chilling confirmation of our deepest fear. Asterisk, he has a partner. The woman. Asterisk, the nightmare wasn't over. The web was bigger than we knew. Jason Miller was in custody, but the woman with the grandmotherly smile who had walked so calmly into Chloe's hospital room was still out there. She was the loose thread, and if we didn't pull it, the whole terrible tapestry could unravel all over again. I didn't go to the police station. I didn't go home. I went straight back to the hospital, the blanket from the police still wrapped around my shoulders, my clothes smeared with blood and white airbag powder. Officer Miller came with me, his face set in a grim line. The standoff in the alley was over, but a new battle was beginning. When I entered Chloe's room, she was propped up in bed, the breathing tube gone, replaced by the nasal cannula again. Her eyes, wide and frantic, locked onto mine the moment I walked in. The sedation had worn off, and with it, the fog that had clouded her memory. She remembered everything. "Mom," she gasped, her voice raw from the tube. She reached for me, her hands trembling. The woman, when she came in with the iced chips, she leaned over me. She was smiling. She said, "Tell Jason the books are balanced." Then she just left. Officer Miller, standing by the door, pulled out his notebook. "The books are balanced. Are you sure that's what she said, Chloe?" Chloe nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I was so groggy I thought I was dreaming. But after the reaction, after they brought me back, it all came flooding back. It was a message. She was reporting to him. It was a code. A message from one criminal to another. The books were their financial records. She was telling Jason that she had secured the evidence, that she had done her part. "She's not just an accomplice," I said, the realization dawning on me with cold clarity. "She's the mastermind." It made a terrible sense. Jason was the numbers man, the inside guy at the company. But the cold brilliance of using a kind-faced, older woman to deliver a murder weapon? The cunning to steal a volunteer smock and walk past armed guards? That was a different kind of criminal mind. Mark was the weak one, Jason was the brawn and the numbers, but this woman, she was the architect. The hunt intensified. With Chloe's statement, the police had a new direction. They flooded Jason's known associates, focusing on older women. They scoured financial records for any unusual payments. They put out a new, more detailed bulletin for the Pink Lady, as the media had started calling her. For the next 48 hours, we lived in a state of suspended animation. Chloe was moved to a new, top-secret room within the hospital, under a fake name. I stayed with her, both of us jumping at every sound. The kindness of the nurses, the dedication of the police. It was a buffer against the world, but we knew it was fragile. The break came on the third day. Officer Miller arrived, looking exhausted but triumphant. "We found her," he said without preamble. "Her name is Helen Croft. 67 years old. Retired, you're not going to believe it, retired chief financial officer of a major investment firm. She has a spotless record. A pillar of the community. She volunteers at the library and a local soup kitchen. A CFO." The pieces snapped together with an almost audible click. She had the financial expertise to orchestrate the embezzlement from afar, to launder the money. Jason was her puppet, her inside man. Mark was their patsy. And we were the loose ends. "How did you find her?" I asked, my voice a whisper. A rookie detective thought to cross-reference Jason Miller's phone logs with the volunteer roster at the library. Officer Miller explained. Her name came up. They'd had dozens of calls. We pulled her financials. Over the past year, she's deposited nearly $200,000 in cash into various accounts, always just under the reporting limit. "Where is she?" Chloe asked, her hand gripping mine tightly. "That's the problem," Officer Miller admitted, his shoulders slumping. "She's gone. She cleared out her safe deposit box yesterday. Withdrew a large sum of cash. Her car is gone. We have an APB out on her vehicle, but she has a several-hour head start. She's in the wind." The air went out of the room. She had escaped. After all this, after the pain and the terror, the one who might have been most responsible was going to get away. She would disappear with her money and live out her life in comfort, while we were left with the scars. A profound sense of injustice settled over me. It was a cold, heavy weight. We had survived the extreme violence, but this felt like a different kind of defeat. The days turned into a week. Chloe was finally discharged from the hospital. We couldn't go back to her house. The memories were too dark. We couldn't go to my house. It felt exposed. We moved into a small, secure apartment the police helped us find, our lives reduced to a few boxes of belongings. The legal process began. Mark, faced with overwhelming evidence and the testimony of his intended victims, took a plea deal for attempted murder and conspiracy, accepting a sentence of 25 years to life. Jason Miller, also looking at attempted murder charges, was fighting it, but the case against him was solid. But Helen Croft remained a ghost. The extreme events were over, but the quiet that followed was not peaceful. It was filled with anxiety, with night terrors, with the constant looking over our shoulders. We were safe, but we didn't feel safe. The world had lost its color. One afternoon, about a month after Chloe came home, we were sitting on the floor of our new apartment, surrounded by unpacked boxes. The sun was streaming through the window. It was a beautiful, normal day, but it felt flat. Chloe was staring at a small, framed photo of her father, who had passed away years ago. "He always said that kindness was a choice you make, even when the world isn't kind to you," she said softly. "I've been trying to remember that." Her words struck a chord in my own weary heart. We had faced unimaginable cruelty. We had every reason to build walls, to hide from the world, to let bitterness take root. But that wasn't who we were. It wasn't who I had raised her to be. He was right, I said, my voice firm for the first time in weeks. "We can't let them steal our empathy, Chloe. That's the one thing they can't take from us. If we let them do that, then they've truly won." It was a decision, a conscious turning point. We started small. We bought a potted plant for the balcony. We baked cookies and brought them to the police station to thank the officers. We started volunteering together at an animal shelter, finding solace in the unconditional love of creatures who had also been betrayed by the world. It was in those small acts of kindness, in choosing to care when it would have been easier not to, that we began to heal. We were cleaning out one of the last boxes from my old house when I found it. Tucked inside an old recipe book between the pages for shepherd's pie and apple crisp was a small silver flash drive. Chloe stared at it, her eyes wide. "The insurance file," she whispered. "I hid it there the day I confronted Mark. I forgot." With everything that happened, we handed it over to Officer Miller. It contained everything: the secret accounts, the transfers, the emails between Jason and Helen planning the embezzlement, and later discussing the permanent solution to the Chloe problem. It was the final piece of the puzzle. A week later, Officer Miller called. His voice was buzzing with excitement. "We got her," he said. Helen Croft was arrested at a luxury resort in Florida. She was about to board a private yacht to the Bahamas. The flash drive was the final piece we needed. She's being extradited back to Iowa to face charges of conspiracy to commit murder, attempted murder, and grand larceny. I hung up the phone and looked at Chloe. We didn't cheer. We didn't cry. We just sat in a long, quiet silence, feeling a weight we had carried for so long finally, truly lift. The story was over. The danger had passed. The justice we craved was being served. That evening, we sat on our small balcony, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and purple. The air was clean and fresh. Below us, people lived their lives, unaware of our battle, of our victory. "Mom," Chloe said, leaning her head on my shoulder. "Thank you. For everything. For not giving up on me." I put my arm around her, holding my daughter, my brave, kind, empathetic daughter. We had been to the darkest place and back. We had seen the worst of humanity, but we had also seen the best, in the police, the nurses, our neighbors, and in each other. The world was still a place where basements could be locked and air could turn to poison. But it was also a place where a mother's love could be a shield, where a daughter's strength could be an inspiration, and where kindness, chosen again and again, could be the most powerful force of all. We were broken, yes, but we were mending, and we were together. If you watched till the end, leave a comment with what you feel and do not forget to like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for watching.